What up? Fins up. How y'all doing up there, Dolphins? I'm kidding. It's the off season. I know y'all ain't doing that well. Good as can be expected, right? So first things first, happy birthday to Brian Cox, former 5th round pick, Miami Dolphins linebacker. For you youngins that don't know, Brian Cox was a star linebacker for us before Zach Thomas. About 5 years he played on the team. He played a couple other teams in the league. He actually came back and was an assistant coach with us for a little bit. 3-time Pro Bowler, Super Bowl champ with a team we don't want to mention, but whatever. It is what it is. You know, this is how NFL careers used to go. You know, you didn't stay on the same team forever, like Marino, right? Most of these players kind of bounced around, which is fine because we're going to be talking about free agency today and players bouncing around, right? So, big news out of Dolphins camp recently, Jason Sanders. Jason Sanders, our star kicker, 5-year contract extension. So for those of you that don't know, Jason Sanders not only was the man this year, but he did kind of dirty. So Pro Bowl voting takes into account a big chunk of online fan voting. I like it and I don't like it. You know, it's fun, it's cool that we all get to be involved and interact with the league. But at the same time, sometimes stuff like this happens. So Pro Bowl voting wraps up middle of December. So, obvious math there's only 3 actual months of the entire league played at that time. Of those 3 months, Jason Sanders was AFC Special Teams Player of the Month 2 out of 3 times, right? He won it in October and he won it again in November. And he didn't make the Pro Bowl. Yeah. And you see why fan voting is kind of nonsense. Instead, Justin Tucker of the Baltimore Ravens got in, I believe. Somebody fact-checked me on that. But Jason Sanders, in the end, got the last laugh, right? Because the all-pro voting, the thing that actually matters, the Associated Press votes for an all-pro team. For those of you who don't know how that works, the Associated Press is a group of mostly sports writers. There's other people involved, editors and stuff like that. But essentially, they vote on the all-pro team, which is one of the highest honors you can get. It's not actually given by the NFL. We all know the awards given by the NFL are nonsense. The MVP award always goes to a quarterback. You know, whatever. I can go on forever about that. I think there's only ever been quarterbacks and running backs that have won it. I could be wrong about that if we dive back deep enough. But, I mean, a guy like Aaron Donald's the best player in the league every freaking year and is not even in contention. You know, receivers never won it. You know, you got a guy like Derrick Henry this year, monster season, over 2,000 yards. He probably had a shot. But to be fair, I think it did go to the right place this year. Aaron Rodgers had a season unlike everything we've ever seen. I mean, not only did he have a 70+% completion percentage, which, I mean, while that's becoming more common in the NFL nowadays, it's still pretty amazing. Like it used to be, the only guy that would even sniff that was Drew Brees every year. Now a couple guys do it, but it's still a huge accomplishment. But he also went something like 48-5 or something like that, touchdown interception ratio, which is just insane. Like for those of you who aren't big stat guys, like think of it like this: a 2-to-1 touchdown interception ratio is not horrible. 3-to-1 is pretty damn good. Like if you take out the last game we played against the Buffalo Bills, Tua was going like 4-to-1, which is pretty freaking awesome. Like Rodgers did almost 10-to-1. It's like unheard of. Good for him, you know. But typically that award goes to just the quarterback that was on the team that had a lot of success. I mean, there's been years where certain players have been outperformed by other players at their position, namely quarterbacks again, and still won the award because their team did better, which makes no freaking sense. But whatever. I mean, it is what it is. We're not going to change the NFL MVP award. Speaking of Aaron Donald, by the way, shout out Aaron Donald becoming the 3rd player in NFL history to have 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards. So the first 2, Lawrence Taylor and J.J. Watt. Quite honestly, Aaron Donald should have 4. Like Stephon Gilmore won last year. I think most people around the league don't think it was really deserved. I mean, our boy Devontae Parker blew that guy up the last game of the season. I don't remember the stats now. It's been over a year, but I want to say he had like 10 catches for like 130 yards at a touchdown. Some crazy, number on a guy that's supposed to be Defensive Player of the Year. And quite frankly, like this year, I mean, T.J. Watt and our boy X both had better seasons than Gilmore had last year, right? And Donald still won because he deserves it, man. He's the best. So Donald should have won it last year. Again, NFL awards are a joke, whatever. But we're not here to talk about it, right? We're here to talk about Miami. So our boy Jason Sanders, 5-year contract extension. Total numbers, everything right here, $22 million. So it's averaging roughly $4.4 million a year. That's pretty good money for a kicker. Today's NFL. Now, I would probably argue that he is the best kicker in today's NFL. So if anybody deserves it, it's him. But it's still solid numbers for a kicker. Now, the one thing to keep in mind is this is a 5-year extension. So Sanders is already on the books for 2021. So this 5-year deal puts him on the books through 2026. Now, in the NFL world, that's a very long time for a kicker to be on the books. I always joke that, like, kickers and punters, it was more specifically kickers, but is one of the best jobs in the NFL because you get paid more than most people. You don't really work that much, right? You might come on the field 7, 8, 10 snaps a game. However, it's one of the least secure jobs in the NFL because when you start missing, that's it. Right? Now, Sanders missed a total of 3 field goals last year, 26 for 29. Staggering numbers, just really good. And the odd thing is, the farther he was away from the field goal post, he seemed to be a little more accurate. So I don't want to overhype and be like, oh, we only won games because of our awesome kicker. But just something to keep in mind here. When you have an offense like Chan Gailey's, where we struggle sometimes to move the ball, especially on the ground, right? Which is, you'll hear me talk about this at length, but in my opinion, the most important part of your offensive game is running the ball. Having a guy that can consistently hit 50-yard field goals puts you in a position to win. Look, there's a bunch of games where our defense stood up. We had special teams touchdowns. We did all kinds of cool stuff, right? Tua balled out, Fitz balled out, Parker, Gesicki, all these guys. But a lot of these games we were only in because of our boy Sanders. Right? So to me, $4.4 million a year to win a couple games. You're talking about maybe 2 or 3 games that we would not have won without this guy. I think that's worth it. His total cap number right now puts him at about 14th on our team. That doesn't necessarily mean much. There's a lot of rookies that won't be re-signed when their deal's up that are making pennies that are under him. And we have, I think it's the second youngest team in football. I think the Rams are technically the youngest. They're like 26 years, almost to the day of the average player. We're like 26.17 or something. I think there's not like the Chargers or somebody else maybe like very close or maybe even tied with us. But a very young team, right? So you look at guys like, Solomon Kinley, 6th-round rookie, like he's not going to be making as much, right? Guys like Savad Ahmed or Ahmed, however you say it, is undrafted rookie. He's not going to make that much. So like those type of dudes are going to be under that number, but it is what it is. Like don't pay too much attention to that ranking and where he's at in the salary cap, especially because those things change. Free agencies come in, drafts come in, trades, who knows. So that being said, did a big rant about Deshaun Watson last week, and it appears that we're out of the running. Obviously nothing's official, but there's a lot of other teams that are emerging as front runner. Last night it came out, late last night, Denver is one of the teams that's really hard in the mix, and it actually makes a lot of sense for Denver. I think they've spent so much around Drew Lock, and I wanted to give Drew Lock a shot. I was excited when they took him, but he hasn't been there. When you look at a team that spent a 1st-round pick on Cortland Sutton, you look at a team that spent a 1st-round pick on Jerry Jeudy, a 2nd-round pick on KJ Hamler, 1st-round pick on Noah Fant. They brought in Melvin Gordon last year via trade. Phillip Lindsay's been a solid running back for them, even though he might be gone, the upcoming free agency period. They spent a lot on that offense to not get production, and they just if they want to have an offense, they got to fix the quarterback position. Now, quite frankly, I think their bigger needs are on defense, but whatever. Even though I live here in Denver, Colorado, Rocky Mountains, they're not calling me for advice. So, kick rocks. So what we're going to talk about today, other than Brian Cox and Jason Sanders, it is free agency. So a quick profile on some of the receivers that have been linked to the Dolphins over the last few days or weeks or whatever it is. I hesitate to do this because I don't want to get the wrong impression out to some people. And I don't want to say I'm advocating for us overspending on a position that, while some people may consider a position of need, I don't think it's necessarily a super important position in the overall scheme of things. So, first things first, all these rumors about Devontae Smith flying around the number 3 pick. I detailed this heavy last week, but not only is receiver not worth the number 3 pick, any receiver, but Devontae Smith is not even the best receiver in this draft. And in fact, he might not even be the second best receiver in this draft, but whatever. That's a whole nother day. So how do we stop these fans from clamoring for a receiver at number 3? Well, we fixed the receiver problem elsewhere. And here's why I say problem. Current receivers on the team: Devontae Parker are number 1. Preston Williams are number 2. Yes, I know, before you scream at me, there's been injury concerns. Preston has yet to finish a whole season. Parker has had a hamstring issue. It seems like since he was born. I get it, right? I get it. You know, everyone I'm talking about right now was on the team last year, and all we talked about was how we didn't have number 1 targets because these guys are off the field. Hear you, right? Just follow me for a second. So, number 3 gets a little hazy. Like, personally, I'm going to say Jakeem Grant is our number 3 guy. And for those of you who know me for a while, I've been a Grant fan for a long time. I always wondered why he didn't get more production in the offense. And he really disappointed me last year. I mean, there were a couple plays that really made me scratch my head and go, is this the same guy? I mean, there were some drops on very clean passes that hit him right in the hands. There were some drops on passes that maybe weren't perfect, but as an NFL receiver, like, you should be able to handle those. I mean, 2, his first interception was a ball that hit Grant in the chest and he dropped. So I'm not. I hope Grant bounces back, right? I'm not ready to write him off just yet, especially because his contract is super cheap. It's, I want to say, like $4 million a year. I actually have the numbers right here. Yeah, his base salary this year is $3.6 million, and his bonus is $600,000. So it's just over $4 million, which I mean is pennies on the dollar for a receiver with the abilities he has, as long as he can get his head together. But Grant was on my. I promised Stephen D I wouldn't curse, so I got to find a cleaner way to say my naughty list, I guess, and go Santa Claus on him. But let's hope Grant bounces back. So to me, he's really true number 3. Allen Hurns is coming back. You know, I think Allen Hurns is going to fit in that number 4 role. Allen Hurns, you know, for those of you who don't know much about him, because he only had that one season in limited action with the Finns. You know, Allen Hurns is a veteran. He's a possession guy, right? He's not going to be burning people deep. He's not going to be, you know, a highlight reel guy. He's going to have those out routes, those post routes, those, you know, 3rd and 5, and you need to move the chains. He's a sure-handed guy. He doesn't really drop the ball much. But again, he's not the best route runner in the world. He doesn't have amazing hands. You're not going to be playing with him in Madden. Put it like that, right? But he's a solid veteran that can contribute to the team, and I mean, that's what we need, right? That's what Flo wants. That's what Vera wants. I got side note. His name's Flores. Stop with the Flo stuff. It's horrible. Not only does it not sound good, but like, we're grown-ups. Come on. So Coach Flores wants. You guys got me doing it now. But in my opinion, Hurns is going to be the number 4 guy, or at least, you know, our depth chart, once you get past 3, it's going to get kind of hazy. But, you know, he's the guy that's going to be on the field, I think, a little bit more, or at least I hope he is. And I know he's a guy that a lot of people have talked about potentially being cut from the team because of the COVID holdout, and because, you know, we want to bring in these new players and all. I mean, here's the thing. Like, cutting Allen Hurns doesn't really save us any money. Like, I think, actually, I shouldn't say I think. I have all the numbers and stuff right here. Overthecap.com. Check it out if you guys are interested in salary cap stuff. And also check out my fellow Miami sports music podcaster, TD Fintalk, did a really cool video yesterday where he basically dove a little bit into restructuring contracts for those of you who don't know how that works, and talked about how Miami could free up some money this year. I personally don't really think we need to free up so much money this year. I like the direction the team's going with some of this stuff, but food for thought. Yeah, so Allen Hurns is on the books for a little over $2 million this year. That in dead money if we cut him. So the way it works when you cut somebody is some of the money you get to save and some of the money you don't, based on their contracts, right? This is why, like, when we cut Ndamukong Suh, we were still paying him the next year. So Hearn's dead money is going to be a little over $2 million. We're only actually going to save like $700,000, which is not really much in the grand scheme of things. So get out of here. Yeah, like don't even bring that up to me again. And then of course you got our other guys who are going to rotate. I mean, you got Perry, you got Bowden, but I'm gonna go with Bowden unless I meet him. He corrects me. I don't know. I've heard both Bowden, Bowden. It's just Bowden's the one that makes sense. That's how it's spelled. But whatever. Somebody again correct me if I'm wrong. So those are going to be the core, I think, group of guys. I mean, Isaiah Ford is back. Maybe he's been an enigma, man. He's looked good at some points, and he's also been unable to crack, the active roster and get off the practice squad at some points. We got rid of him last year. He went to New England. They cut him and brought him back. Listen, I solemnly swear that I hope any player on our roster breaks out and becomes a star, but at this point, I don't know what to expect from Isaiah Ford. If he can contribute, awesome. So all that being said, not a lot of money is actually tied up in those positions. Grant's, like I said, like about $4 million a year. Parker's 10, which is not a ton of money for a receiver, by the way. Like all you people hammering on Parker, like for what he's getting paid, I will gladly take Parker 10 times out of 10. Some of these other guys we're about to talk about are making over double, right? It's insane what Parker's making. So the other guys, are all on rookie contracts. Perry's a rookie contract, Bowden's a rookie contract, Preston Williams is still a rookie contract. And hopefully he can stay healthy this year and earn himself an extension. And it looks like my other laptop just died, so some of the numbers I'm throwing at you guys in a second may not be very accurate. But talking about the receiver position in Miami, there's been essentially three main guys, I'm not allowed a fourth one, that have been kind of linked to us, right? So the first one, in my opinion, is probably the best one. And I should say the first one is the first one I want to talk about. There's no order, nothing like this. So the first one, former Penn State receiver, Allen Robinson. So Allen Robinson, for those of you who don't know, started his career with the Jaguars. He actually had like a 1,400-yard season at one point with the Jaguars. I know, right? Jaguars? Seriously. And then he missed some time with injury. He had Jaguars quarterbacks, right? Like not the best combination for a receiver to be successful. So after 4 seasons there, he shot over to Chicago. And I've been kind of singing his praises ever since. So over the last 2 seasons, Allen Robinson has caught a total of 200 passes. Now he's in Chicago. So he's playing with Chicago quarterbacks, Trubisky and Foles. So he had almost 300 targets. But that says nothing about him as a receiver. Go back and watch some Bears games. I actually lived in Chicago one of the seasons that he was there. So I got to see a lot of Bears games on TV while I was watching, the away Fins games. And whew, man, we complained about a quarterback for some time. I don't want to hear it. They've been going through it. Chicago's never had a good. Even when they were winning Super, you got to go all the way back to Sid Luckman for you NFL historians. He was the quarterback during World War II for them to have a great quarterback. And by the way, he was pretty awesome at the time. But neither here nor there. So Allen Robinson, 200 catches over the course of the last 2 seasons coming from Chicago Bears quarterbacks, 4 drops. That's pretty astounding. In my opinion, he's going to be the best free agent wide receiver this year. Comes at a price. So as of now, we're still hovering with around that 27-ish million in cap space. Receivers of his caliber in the NFL, just being honest, are making 18, 19, 20 million a year. The top 2 receivers right now in terms of paychecks are DeAndre Hopkins, who I think is making 27 or so. Hopkins' contract is ridiculous, especially considering the fact he's 29 years old. But Julio Jones is number 2. He's at 22 mil. Julio might not even see that money this year. Julio might be gone. Age, injuries, rebuilding, it is what it is. But, Amari Cooper just signed for 20. In my opinion, Robinson and Cooper are very similar receivers. Cooper might have a slight edge over Robinson, especially because he's a little younger. But also, he's had Derek Carr and Dak Prescott versus Mitchell Trubisky and Nick Foles. So take that for what you will. I'm a big fan of Robinson. I hope that he gets the respect he deserves. I hope he makes a lot of money, and I would love to see him on Miami. But just being honest, the way Greer and Flores do business and what his contract is going to command, I don't see it happening. I'd love it to happen, I mean, hey, I was surprised by Byron Jones last year, right? I really wanted Byron, but I kind of wrote him off after we paid X. I didn't even look. In fact, my number one free agent to target last year was Chris Jones from Kansas City, who they ended up retaining. But it would have been Byron Jones had I thought there was a shot in hell that we could have got him. So Allen Robinson isn't 100% off the table, but probably, right? He would be my number one receiver. He's actually right now my number 2 free agent target for us. We'll talk about the other guy probably next week because we're on the receiver kick right now. So the second name that's been floated around is Chris Godwin. So for those of you who don't know, Tampa is in financial ruin right now. Their cap numbers are all over the place. Shaq Barrett isn't on the books next year. Antonio Brown isn't on the books this year. Chris Godwin isn't on the books next year. Leonard Fournette isn't on the books next year. Gronkowski isn't on the book next year. Which you'll notice most of the names I just said were the only guys that actually scored points in the Super Bowl. So Tampa, put together the dream team and they won. Cool, good for them. But a lot of those guys aren't going to be back. Now, I knew for a while Godwin wasn't going to be back, and I actually floated to some Dolphins fans the ideas of bringing Antonio Brown on board. However, it appears that Antonio Brown might be returning to the Bucs. Now, the reason they're going to be able to do that is because with his age and his off-the-field stuff, he is going to be significantly cheaper than some of these other guys. But it appears he's returning to the Bucs, and that's actually the reason I was interested in him, is because, again, he's a veteran. And pretty much everything I just said about Allen Hurns being a crafty veteran works for Antonio Brown. But Antonio Brown is much better at everything. He was the best receiver in the league for a long time, and those skills haven't completely disappeared. I mean, you saw that during the season. He had a stretch where it was like 5 or 6 games in a row he caught a touchdown. Something else no one's talking about. But yeah, so it looks like he's going to be sticking with the Bucs. Chris Godwin, on the other hand, he's been in the league 4 years. He did have the huge breakout year a year ago with Jameis Winston. Before that, and then even this year, the numbers were not true number one receiver, wasn't he? You couple that with the fact that he's never played a complete season of football. Even when he led the league in receiving in 2019, he only played 14 games, which I always love when that happens. I think Josh Gordon the one year was suspended for 2 games. He said he still led the league in receiving. I always think that's awesome. But anyway, Godwin, in my opinion, he's not worth the money. He's a very, very good receiver. If we can get Godwin for Parker money, sign me up. Right? If we could get him for 11 or 12, maybe even sign me up. But if he's talking about 18, 19 plus, like some of these other guys, I'll pass, dude. We've seen too many good receivers drafted later too, over the last few years. I mean, you look at just last year, second round guys, KJ Hamler, T. Higgins, was Visca Chenault, who I said coming into the draft last year I think might be the most talented receiver in the draft. Jags are getting Trevor Lawrence. We'll see what happens with Laviska Shenault. He had some injuries in Colorado. That's why he kind of fell later, but I'm excited about the guy. I mean, even Justin Jefferson was, the 4th receiver taken late in the first round last year, and he's looking like, the best guy from that draft class. And there's other guys. I talked last time about Terry McLaurin, DK Metcalf, A.J. Brown, all guys that went later in the draft. A.J. Brown was still a first-round pick, but he was later in the first round. The other guys, Metcalf was a second. I forget maybe where that right now. I don't even know where McLaurin went. I know it was late. And he's, in my opinion, the best one out of all of them. So this receiver talent can be found later in the draft, too. But we're talking about free agency right now. So 2 other names that have been kind of thrown around out there. One is T.Y. Hilton. T.Y. Hilton has had a productive career with the Colts. Quite frankly, I never thought he was that good. His numbers, say maybe I'm a little wrong on that. I mean, the Colts have never really had solid receivers since Marvin Jones and Marvin Harrison and Reggie Wayne left. Marvin Harrison, like me, is from Philly. I can't believe I just screwed his name up. You'll know why I screwed his name up again in a second here. But T.Y. Hilton, he's older. He might take a cheaper payday to come to Miami. He is from Miami, so that might have something to do with it. But again, I don't really think he's what we need. I think we need that guy that can stretch the field and take some double teams away from Parker and Gesicki and maybe Preston underneath. And Hilton's not that guy, especially at this point in his career. He's always been very productive out of the slot, which we have a bunch of those guys. So I don't see it happening unless he's willing to take a very, very, very cheap deal. I mean, I'm talking like 7-8 mil. And even then, I'm not saying that's a bad number for him. I'm just saying I don't know if it makes sense for us, right? And then the last guy, this is why I screwed up Marvin Harrison's name, disrespected the Hall of Famer, Marvin Jones Jr. So Marvin Jones Jr., like most players in Detroit, very kind of underrated, unheard of guy because he played in Detroit. Hey, shout out to Dan Campbell, man. Like I made jokes for the last couple of years about, like, how Detroit isn't even trying to win. It's because, like, when's the last time you even heard of, like, hey, Detroit's trading for this player? Dan Campbell gets there, and hey, immediately they're making moves, right? They just stacked up a couple first round picks. They have some good young talent on the roster, so let's see what Campbell does. Again, for those of you guys that aren't really that in depth with it, Campbell was our interim head coach a couple years ago. Players really rallied under him. The record was better than it was before, but when you fire a coach and bring in an interim head coach, your record's typically not that good to begin with. But a lot of people wanted to see him get a shot at the head coaching job. Didn't happen. It is what it is, man. Hey, I wish him the best. Former NFL tight end, and now he's got T.J. Hawkinson, who's a great young tight end up there. Same pedigree as George Kittle and Noah Fant, all Iowa guys. Iowa seems to be producing some really good tight ends. Anyway, Marvin Jones Jr., sure-handed guy. He's quick. I wouldn't call him like elite speed by any means, but he's a quick guy. He's a good route runner. Essentially, I think he's similar to Robinson, but a lot cheaper. He's not quite as good as Robinson, but he's a solid route runner. He's okay with separation. He knows how to control his body. And if you don't understand what that means, think of like Devontae Parker, right? Devontae Parker was constantly getting blanketed by some of these guys because he's not the fastest guy in the world. But he uses his body to box out some of these corners and catch the ball, right? You heard me talk about this last week. Tied for the most contested catches in the league this year. And I want to say over the last 2 years, he's actually #1, but don't quote me on that. So Marvin Jones Jr. to me is an attractive option because he's probably going to come in around that $8, $9, $10 million number. Maybe even a little less than that, not too much less, but he'd be a solid option for what we're trying to do and not breaking the bank on a player. Career is mentioned several times. I'd rather have 3 really good players than 1 great player. Yeah, it's a team sport, right? This isn't the NBA. It's not whoever drafts Kevin Durant or Zion or LeBron or whoever wins, right? It's a team sport. So while I don't want to oversell the receiver position, and I don't think the receiver position is the most important thing in the world, if we want to upgrade what we have, those are probably the top options. I mean, of course, there's always other stuff, right? A guy like Julio might get released because of salary issues. We might bring him in for 1 year or whatever it is. But I'm personally not really a fan of that 1 year Band-Aid thing. Like, yes, it could get us there in some places when we're strapped for cash. But if, like most Dolphins fans think, that we really need to address receiver from the future, then it's not really the answer. I mean, there's other guys that could be kicked around the league that get cut, traded last minute, whatever it is. I'm not really in the mindset of giving up a lot of draft picks or existing players or whatever it is for really any of the receivers in the league. I mean, one of the names that comes to mind is Michael Thomas out there in New Orleans. Michael Thomas is probably, I think, going to be a cap casualty. I know the Saints just restructured Drew Brees, but they're so far in the hole. They have by far the worst cap situation in the NFL. I don't know if there's a way they can keep him. Now, because of the animosity between him and Parker, I don't necessarily know if we bring him back even. And he kind of showed this year when he's not getting 1 billion targets, he's not in the same conversation as some of these guys like Devontae Adams or DeAndre Hopkins or whoever they are. So just a quick profile there on some of the top wide receiver agents. Again, in my mind, free agents. Again, in my mind, Allen Robinson's the #1 guy. Godwin. By the way, Allen Robinson and Chris Godwin, both Penn State guys. So Penn State's starting to put out some really good receivers into the NFL and really some good players. I mean, one of my top draft targets we'll talk about later is Micah Parsons. One of my top draft targets I thought we may be able to get a little later last year was Edor Gross-Matos. He ended up going to Carolina. So Penn State's making a comeback. It's been a long time since the Sandusky stuff that we won't talk about here. But yeah, so that's it, right? Profile of some of the top free agent wide receivers that could be interested in Miami, that could come to Miami. Again, I'll talk a little more about some other free agent positions as we lead up into free agency. And then when we get through free agency, then we're going to talk about the draft. And I personally think probably our best option to address wide receiver is in the draft. And I know you're going to be scratching your head going, wait, were you just saying no, Devontae Smith at number 3? Yes, no, Devontae Smith at number 3. We're not talking about number 3, right? We have another pick in the first round. I'm not even sure. I don't even really think that's where we should spend it. But depending on how free agency goes, we may be able to free up some of these second-round picks to grab some receivers. And as we've seen, there's some really good receivers deeper in the draft. So all that being said, happy birthday to Brian Cox. Shout out to Jason Sanders. That's my kicker. We love you guys. My girl loves Jason Sanders. Like, what kind of girl loves the kicker? You know what I mean? But that's just how good he is, you know? Dolph fans, love y'all. As always, check out the DWA Gear right there on MiamiSportsMusic.com. We'll have some links and stuff in the bottom. Check out the What Would Shula Do Gear. That's my brand. Obviously, this is the What Would Shula Do podcast. Everything you buy on there helps me get season tickets, helps me study, helps me bring stuff like this directly to you. Check out the other Miami Sports Music podcasts. I mean, we got so much going on. We got Dudley Do Wrong, my boy TD Finn's Talk. We have the 305 Sports News. Of course, our boy Jamie, who's always holding it down. We're going to bring more stuff on. We're going to bring fans on. I mean, we're going to do so much cool stuff. As of now, we are planning to head to Cleveland for the draft. No idea what the NFL is going to actually allow. You know, they kind of ripped our hearts out last year when it came to Vegas, but it is what it is. So we are planning on heading to Cleveland for the draft. While we're there, we're definitely going to stop at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, bring us some cool stuff, probably from both locations. You know, we might get something with, me and some of these other guys, maybe me and Solo, me and TD, Stephen D, whoever. We're going to do some awesome stuff, man. So thank you guys for watching. As always, all that cool, fun YouTube stuff, like the videos, follow, share them, all that. We thank you very much. One last thing. Dolphins fans. Black is not a team color. Stop buying this crap. This was a gift from my sister. I love her, so thank you very much. But please, Dolphins fans, I'm seeing black everywhere. This is not a team color. We don't wear black. We've never worn black. Black is the ugliest color to wear. I don't know why we're putting black all over fan stuff, but whatever. That being said, if y'all want a black What Would Shula Do t-shirt, hit me up. I got you. All right, guys.